Good day, dear listeners. My name is Eleanor Voss, and I am glad you found your way here. Before I begin, please take a moment to like this video and stay with me until the very end. And when you're done, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love knowing how far these words travel. Now, let me tell you about the night I folded my dinner napkin, set it beside my untouched plate, and walked out of my daughter's house for the last time as the woman I used to be. I was 68 years old when my life changed. Not all at once, not with any particular drama. It changed the way most true things change quietly, in the early morning, when no one else is watching. For 33 years, I had been a school librarian in Hartwell, Ohio, a small town with one good diner, a hardware store that had been in the same family for 4 decades, and a public library that smelled like wood polish and ambition. I retired with a modest pension, a sensible savings account, and the dignified fatigue of a woman who had spent 3 decades helping other people find the books they needed. I drove a 10-year-old Buick. I kept a vegetable garden. I made my own bread on Fridays. My husband, Arthur, had died 3 years before all of this. Pancreatic cancer, 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end. He had been a kind man, a former civil engineer who spent his evenings building birdhouses in the garage and his weekends reading history books in the armchair by the window. We had been married for 41 years. I still set 2 coffee cups out every morning for the first year after he was gone. Habit is its own kind of grief. Our only daughter, Diane, was 42. She lived 20 minutes away in Birchwood Estates, a neighborhood of large colonial homes with professionally edged lawns and seasonal flower arrangements on the porches. She had married Robert Callahan 11 years ago. Robert sold commercial insurance, wore expensive watches, and had a particular talent for making you feel slightly smaller than when you walked into the room. Their son Jamie was 12 Arthur's eyes, Arthur's quiet curiosity, and the one member of that household I loved without reservation. After Arthur died, Diane called every Sunday, then every other Sunday, then occasionally, and briefly, with the television on in the background, and Robert's voice cutting through the wall asking about dinner. I told myself she was busy. I was very good at telling myself things. The requests began the way they always do, small and reasonable on the surface. Could I watch Jamie during the long weekend? Could I bring something to the neighborhood party? Something presentable, Mom. Please don't do that layered salad again. Could I help them reorganize the spare bedroom? I said yes to all of it. I said yes because I wanted to be useful, because usefulness was the only currency I could see that still bought me time with my daughter. But the exchange rate had been shifting for years, and I had been too proud or too frightened changed everything. I won $71 million in the Ohio Classic Lottery. I had been buying 2 tickets every Saturday for 9 years. Always the same numbers. Arthur's birthday, Jamie's birthday, the year we moved to Hartwell, the year we planted the apple tree in the backyard. I checked my ticket on a Sunday morning at the kitchen table in my flannel robe, with the radio on low and a cup of tea going cold. I checked the numbers once. I set the ticket down. I picked it up and checked them again. Then I sat very still for what must have been 5 full minutes, listening to the refrigerator hum and the birds outside arguing over the feeder. Then I called the Lottery Commission's private winners line. I did not call Diane. That was not a calculated decision. It was instinct. A low, quiet voice, somewhere beneath thought that simply said, wait. I didn't know yet what I was waiting to see. I only knew that I needed to look at the world for a little while longer before it knew. Within 2 weeks, following the Lottery Commission's guidance, I had retained an attorney, a careful, methodical man named Marcus Webb, and a financial advisor named Carol Jennings. Together, they established a blind trust through a Delaware LLC. My name appeared nowhere in the public record. After taxes, the lump sum settled at just over $44 million. I went on baking bread on Fridays. The dinner was a Sunday in November. Diane had called it a family meal, though it was served at 6 in the evening and Jamie was at a friend's house. The table was set for 3. I had brought a bottle of red wine and a store-bought pie, having learned my lesson about the layered salad. Robert had been talking for 20 minutes about a business deal that had collapsed. His jaw was tight in the way it got when he had already decided someone was at fault and was still deciding who. Diane refilled his glass twice. Then she turned to me. She didn't raise her voice. That was what I kept returning to afterward. There was no cruelty in her tone, just a kind of casual removal, the way you might explain something to a child you've already grown impatient with. "Mom," she said, "Robert and I have been talking. We love you, we do. But you have to be realistic. You're on a fixed income. You have nothing to offer financially, nothing to protect yourself with. We're barely keeping our own heads above water. We can't be expected to worry about carrying someone who can't contribute anything. You're just there, Mom. I don't know how else to say it." Robert nodded slowly, deliberately, like a man signing a document. I looked at my daughter. I looked at my son-in-law. I looked at the store-bought pie I had carried in and the wine I had brought because I wanted to contribute something. I picked up my napkin. I folded it in half, then in half again, and laid it beside my plate. "All right," I said lively for a moment before I started the engine. The house was lit up in every room. It had always struck me, that house the way they kept every light burning, even in rooms nobody was in. As though darkness were something to be afraid of. I drove home to my small house on Sycamore Lane. I made tea. I sat at the kitchen table, not crying, not yet just sitting the way you sit when something fundamental has shifted and you need to find your footing before you can decide which direction is still forward. I thought about Arthur. He used to say that you could learn everything you needed to know about a person by watching what they did when they believed you had nothing left to give them. I had not fully understood that when he was alive. I understood it now. By the time the tea went cold, something inside me had gone very quiet and very clear. I was not the same woman who had walked into that dinner. She had left with the folded napkin. The next morning, I called Marcus Webb. "I'm ready to access funds," I said. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He was a lawyer. "For what purpose, Mrs. Voss?" "I'd like to purchase a property," I said. "I'll send you the listing today. Here is what you need to understand about Birchwood Estates." Fairfax Drive was a wide, tree-lined street of large homes, built in the late 1990s, where the lawns were manicured by professional crews and the holiday wreaths went up on the first Saturday of December without fail. Diane and Robert's house was number 22, a 4-bedroom colonial with dove-gray shutters, a double garage, and a front-facing bay window with a clear, unobstructed view of the house directly across the street. The house across the street, number 31 Fairfax Drive, had been sitting empty for 8 weeks, with a for sale sign at the end of the driveway. I had noticed it on my last visit. I had looked at it the way you look at things you believe you cannot have. Then I looked at it the way you look at things you are about to purchase with cash. The listing price was $910,000. 5 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, renovated kitchen, high ceilings, a back garden with an old apple tree along the south wall that Arthur, I felt certain, would have admired. Marcus had a full title review completed by the following Thursday. Clean title. Motivated seller relocating for family. Accepted offer by the end of the week. No contingencies. 30-day close. I signed the closing documents in Marcus's conference room on a gray Friday afternoon. 11 documents. 1 borrowed pen. A parking garage visible through the window. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Not happiness, it was too deliberate and too cold for happiness. It was more like the particular satisfaction of finally naming something that had been wrong for a very long time. The renovation began 12 days later. I had hired a Columbus firm through Carol's recommendation. Their brief was specific. Highest standards throughout, but nothing dramatic on the exterior until the work was complete. New roof, refinished hardwood floors, a kitchen renovation with the white marble countertops I had always wanted and never once bought for myself. French doors off the master bedroom opening onto a private deck. The wraparound porch restored and repainted cream with dark sage trim. All of this happening 200 yards from Diane's living room window. She called on a Tuesday evening, a notable thing, since Diane did not call on Tuesdays. "Mom," she said, with a casualness that didn't quite land. "Do you happen to know anything about the house across from us, the one that's sold?" "I drive through Birchwood sometimes," I said. "It's a nice neighborhood. There are contractors there every day. Someone spent serious money on it. Robert has been trying to find out who the buyer is, but the LLC name is completely generic." A pause. "You don't know anything?" "I'm afraid not. I said pleasantly. She accepted this. Before she hung up, she mentioned that Jamie had a school performance coming up in December. She'd love for me to come. I told her I would think about it. I heard the small silence that followed. The old Eleanor would have said yes without a second's hesitation. My oldest friend Vivian Marsh called me. Vivian and I had worked together at the Hartwell Library for 20 years. She was the kind of woman people trusted, instinctively warm and unhurried, with the rare quality of making everyone she spoke to feel genuinely seen. She volunteered at the Birchwood Community Center on Wednesday evenings. Two of her regulars were neighbors of Diane's women named Florence and Bea, who had lived on Fairfax Drive for years. Vivian opened carefully, the way she always did when she was carrying something she didn't want to drop. "I don't want to alarm you, Ellie," she said, "but Florence mentioned something at the center this week. She had coffee with Diane recently. Diane said something about wanting to sort out a family situation before things became complicated, about not being responsible for someone who refused to make sound decisions." A pause. She also mentioned, and Florence wasn't sure what to make of this, looking into something called a guardianship filing, for managing a parent's finances when the parent is deemed incapable of managing them independently. I sat down on the edge of the bed. A guardianship proceeding, a legal mechanism by which a court could appoint someone, a daughter, for instance, to take control of a parent's financial affairs. My daughter had been researching whether she could take legal control of my money, which meant she knew, or strongly suspected, that there was money to control. I thought carefully. The trust was sealed. My name wasn't on any property document. Marcus and Carol were bound by confidentiality. But then I remembered 2 months earlier, a brief item had appeared in the Columbus Dispatch's lottery archive, listing major prize amounts and draw dates from the previous year. Not names, but numbers. Arthur's birthday, Jamie's birthday, the year we came to Hartwell. Numbers Diane knew. Numbers she had grown up hearing me mention every Saturday. I could not prove she had connected them. I did not need to. I called Marcus that same afternoon. "2 things," I said. "First, I need you to review my full legal exposure to any guardianship petition, what they would need to demonstrate, and how we make certain I am completely protected. Second, I want to be in the Fairfax Drive house by December 15th. "Done," he said. "And the second thing?" "That was the second thing," I said. I moved in on December 13th, arriving at 9 in the morning with 2 suitcases, a box of Arthur's books, his photograph, and the African violet that had lived on my kitchen windowsill for 14 years. The house was ready. An interior designer, Carol, had recommended a quiet, gifted woman named Helen had furnished the whole house in 10 days based on a brief I had written with care. Warm, amber hardwood floors, high ceilings, morning light falling across the staircase in a way that made the whole entry glow. Through the front windows directly across the street, I could see the dove-gray shutters of number 22, fully visible, fully knowable. I placed Arthur's photograph on the mantelpiece. I put the African violet in the kitchen window. Then I made coffee at the marble counter and stood looking out at the garden, where come spring I would plant tomatoes beside that old apple tree. Diane came across at 11:30. I watched her approach from the window coat on over what appeared to be her pajama bottoms, which told me she had seen the moving van and come out without stopping to change. Robert was behind her, jacket over a rumpled shirt, the look of 2 people who had stepped outside the boundaries of what they had mapped. I opened the door before they could knock. Diane's voice was very flat, very controlled. "Mom, what is this?" "My house," I said. "Would you like to come in?" They came in. Robert turned slowly in the foyer, taking in the crown molding, the staircase, the double-height entryway. I watched him do the arithmetic. It was not subtle. "How?" Diane said. Not a question with a rise in it, a word pressed flat by everything it was carrying. "The lottery," I said. 9 years of the same numbers every Saturday." The silence that followed was unlike any silence I had experienced in that house before, because that was only the second time I had ever been inside it. Their faces did all the work. Diane's lips parted. Robert's jaw set. "How much?" Robert said. "That's private," I said. "Mom." Diane's voice shifted. Something warmer moved in, something rehearsed. "You should have told us. We could have helped you manage this. At your age, this is a lot to handle alone." I have an attorney and a financial advisor, I said. It's being managed. Robert looked at me with the expression of a man recalibrating mid-strategy. We could contest this, he said. The trust structure. If there are questions about your decision-making capacity, that's a legitimate legal avenue. I looked at him for a long moment. I am 68 years old. I hold a master's degree in library science. I have never carried consumer debt, never missed a mortgage payment, never had so much as a speeding ticket in my adult life. My physician administered a full cognitive assessment at my last physical. I scored in the 91st percentile. My attorney has documented all of it. If you would like to pursue a legal challenge to my competency, I would encourage you to speak with your own attorney first about costs, about likelihood of success, and about what the public record of such a proceeding would look like for your family. Robert's face went red, then white. We'll be in touch, he said. They left. I leaned against the closed door for perhaps 30 seconds, my heart going faster than I would have liked. Then I straightened, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a second coffee, and stood at my marble counter looking out at the garden. They tried warmth next. A text from Diane 4 days later, careful and measured, with Jamie's school performance used as a kind of gentle lever. He keeps asking about you, Mom. He'd really love to see you there. I went. Not for her. Not for him as a negotiating chip, but because Jamie was my grandson, and that was a separate matter entirely. I sat in the back row of Hartwell Middle School's auditorium and watched him deliver the narrator's lines in the winter performance, with the seriousness of a child who understands that some things are worth doing properly. He had Arthur's voice, weight in it even at 12. Diane and Robert were in the 4th row. They turned at the interval and saw me. Diane gave a small, careful smile. Robert gave the nod of a man recalibrating again. I waved to Jamie from the aisle after the curtain came down. He waved back with both hands. I left before the reception. Marcus called the following week with the results of a quiet financial review. I had asked him to commission a matter of prudent due diligence for any person managing significant assets and facing potential legal action. What it revealed was this: 2 dissolved LLCs in Robert's name in the past 3 years. A second mortgage on the Fairfax Drive property taken out the previous spring. Credit card debt estimated conservatively between $70,000 and $90,000. Jamie's school fees running on a deferred payment schedule. They needed money, badly, and they had a mother-in-law sitting directly across the street with $44 million in a sealed trust. Now I understood the guardianship research. Now I understood everything. I called Carol. I told her we were moving into the next phase. Then I updated my will, amended the trust distribution schedule, and sent a certified letter to Marcus's office setting out my intentions in formal writing. Let them come, I thought. Let them try whatever they try next. They came on a Sunday afternoon without warning. Diane had brought flowers, not grocery store flowers, but from the florist on Maple Street, which told me precisely how seriously she was taking this visit. Robert wore his weekend shirt. No portfolio this time. They sat in my living room with tea and spent 20 minutes almost managing to sound like family. Then Diane leaned forward slightly, and I recognized the lean. Mom, she said, we've done a lot of thinking. What Robert said at your door that wasn't acceptable. We were frightened, and fear makes people say things. A glance at Robert. We want to repair this, and we want to make sure you're protected. With this much money, a family trust one that includes us is actually far more legally secure than a private structure managed by someone you've only recently retained. Marcus Webb has managed my trust with complete integrity, I said. I have no concerns about my legal security. An outside attorney has his own interests, Robert said smoothly. Family doesn't. Family, I said. Recently researched applying for guardianship over my finances without my knowledge. The room went still. Diane's composure shifted through several expressions very quickly. That was a moment of panic. We didn't know what you were doing. Now you know, I said. Is all of this worth destroying a family over? Diane's voice dropped, picking up the texture of something genuine or a very good performance of it. I had learned that distinguishing between the two required more trust than I currently had available. I didn't destroy anything, I said quietly. I furnished a house I earned. Robert's composure broke into something clipped and bitten. You're alone here. You're aging alone. One bad fall, one health crisis. You can't buy yourself a family. No, I agreed. You can't. They left. The door closed with controlled intention, not quite a slam, but with a message. Marcus had half expected it. The Franklin County Probate Court heard the case over 4 hours. The petition rested on 2 claims: that my purchase of the Fairfax Drive property demonstrated impaired judgment, and that my refusal to include family in trust management indicated undue influence by my attorney. The judge dismissed both claims. Legal fees were awarded. Robert Callahan was ordered to pay Marcus's firm $11,800. I was in the garden when Marcus called. I had been replanting the African violet into a larger pot, which it had needed for some time. Good, I said. Thank you. Then I called Vivian and asked her to come for lunch. In the months that followed, the neighborhood became something I hadn't expected it to. A life. Florence and Bea, whom I had only known as names, became women I had coffee with on the wraparound porch on Tuesday mornings and walked with through the park on Saturdays. Florence was a retired ER nurse, 73, dry and funny, who had lived on Fairfax Drive long enough to know exactly what Robert Callahan was before I ever arrived. Bea was 66, a former literature teacher, recently and contentedly divorced, who was discovering what she actually enjoyed now that she had time to find out. They had been waiting for someone like me to arrive, I think. And I had been waiting, without knowing it, for women like them. In February, I sold the house on Sycamore Lane. It was gone in 9 days, purchased by a young woman named Grace with 2 small children who stood in the kitchen doorway and looked around with the expression of someone who could already see herself living there. I gave her the clay pot of oregano from the windowsill. Some things belong to a house, not a person. I also, through Carol's careful guidance, established the Arthur and Eleanor Voss Reading Fund at the Hartwell Public Library, enough to restore the summer reading program that had been quietly canceled the previous year for lack of budget, and to sustain it for the next 25 years. The library director called me twice. The second time, she could not speak for several seconds. I did not feel vindictive. I felt the specific satisfaction of a person who has spent a lifetime doing things in proportion, finally given the means to do something larger. In April, I planted tomatoes along the south garden wall, in 4 wide raised beds, next to the apple tree, the kind of garden you plant when you intend to stay. My days found their own shape, unhurried and mine. Morning walks with Florence 3 times a week, lunch with Vivian every other Thursday, a Thursday evening book group, 5 women, a good bottle of wine, and a novel. Bea's living room, always. The cat, always asleep on the good chair. In May, I went to Portugal. 15 days, a small rented apartment in Lisbon. A week in the Alentejo, where the evenings were warm and slow, and the silence was a different kind of silence than I had known. I walked. I ate. I took a pottery class because a woman at the guest house invited me, and I said yes. I was saying yes to things more now. I sent Jamie a postcard of the Lisbon trams. He texted me a photograph of it, pinned to the corkboard above his desk. It looks incredible, Grandma. Can we go someday? Diane's situation moved in the direction the facts had always been pointing. The second mortgage came due in spring. The private school notified them of an outstanding balance. By September, Jamie had transferred to Birchwood Public Middle School. He texted me on his first day. New school is actually all right. The library here has every single Percy Jackson book. That is an excellent library, I replied. Diane and I spoke once a month, brief, careful conversations, mostly about Jamie, working toward something, though neither of us had named what. Then, one Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after the dinner where I had folded my napkin and walked away as one woman and driven home as another, I found a card in my mailbox. No envelope. Diane's handwriting. I was wrong. I know that isn't enough. I don't know what is. But I wanted to start somewhere. I carried it inside. I set it on the mantelpiece beside Arthur's photograph, where the afternoon light would catch it. Then I put the kettle on, sat at my marble counter, and thought carefully about what I wanted to write back. Here is what I learned. The people who decide you have nothing to offer will rarely thank you for proving them wrong. But you don't need their gratitude to move forward. You need your own clarity. I spent 68 years making myself small enough not to inconvenience anyone. I spent the rest of my time taking exactly as much space as I had always deserved. Before you go, one question for you. When someone tells you that you are nothing, that you are merely there, do you fold the napkin and walk away? Or do you stay, hoping they'll change their minds? Leave your answer below. And thank you, truly, for being here with me today.